Uncover the shocking secrets behind a seemingly perfect family torn apart by betrayal, deceit, and murder. This is a story where every twist and turn will leave you questioning the truth. Stay tuned to uncover the chilling details. What drove Emma Thompson to risk everything for an affair with her husband's nephew? How did Mark Thompson discover the secret that would ultimately lead to his tragic end? Did Jake truly manipulate Emma, or was he a victim of her cunning schemes? What critical evidence did Detective John Harper uncover that turned the investigation upside down? Will the court uncover the whole truth behind Mark's mysterious disappearance and untimely death? Welcome to Truth in Crime Cases. Cedar Ridge was a picturesque suburban neighborhood, where every house had a well-manicured lawn, and children played freely in the streets. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and life followed a predictable, tranquil rhythm. But beneath this veneer of suburban bliss, secrets festered, and dark desires simmered, waiting to erupt. Emma Thompson, a striking woman in her early 40s, appeared to have it all. She was married to Mark Thompson, a successful real estate agent who provided a comfortable lifestyle for their family. Their home, a charming two-story house with a white picket fence, was the envy of the neighborhood. They had been married for over 20 years, and together they had raised 2 children who had recently left for college. On the surface, Emma's life seemed perfect, but behind closed doors, her marriage was crumbling. Mark Thompson, a man in his mid-40s with a commanding presence, had once been the love of Emma's life. In their early years, he had been attentive and loving, always putting her needs first. But as the years passed, Mark became more consumed by his work, often leaving Emma feeling neglected and lonely. Their conversations dwindled to mundane exchanges about household chores and bills, and the emotional distance between them grew. Into this fraught environment entered Jake, Mark's nephew. Jake was a handsome, charismatic young man in his early 20s, fresh out of college and looking for a place to stay while he got on his feet. Mark, wanting to help his sister's son, invited Jake to live with them temporarily. Emma, seeing the opportunity for some fresh company, welcomed him with open arms. Jake's arrival brought a breath of fresh air into the Thompson household. He was charming, energetic, and full of life, qualities that Emma found increasingly appealing as she compared him to her emotionally distant husband. Jake, in turn, was captivated by Emma's beauty and sophistication. He admired her elegance and the way she seemed to effortlessly manage everything around her. What began as innocent admiration soon turned into something more. Emma and Jake spent more time together, sharing interests and confiding in each other. Their relationship, initially marked by friendly conversations and shared laughter, began to cross boundaries. The more time they spent together, the more their mutual attraction grew. Emma found herself drawn to Jake's youthful vigor and the attention he lavished upon her, something she had sorely missed in her marriage. As their bond deepened, so did the secrecy surrounding their interactions. They exchanged furtive glances and stolen moments, always careful to avoid Mark's watchful eyes. The tension between them was palpable, and it wasn't long before their relationship turned physical. Emma, overwhelmed by a mix of guilt and desire, convinced herself that she deserved this happiness after years of neglect. Mark, though preoccupied with his work, began to sense that something was amiss. He noticed the subtle changes in Emma's behavior, her increased attentiveness to her appearance, the hushed phone calls, and the way she seemed to light up in Jake's presence. Suspicion gnawed at him, but he couldn't bring himself to confront Emma without concrete evidence. The once serene atmosphere of the Thompson household grew strained. Emma was torn between her illicit affair and her commitment to her marriage. Jake, emboldened by their secret relationship, began to take greater risks, meeting Emma in places they thought were safe from prying eyes. The thrill of their forbidden love blinded them to the potential consequences. It wasn't long before Mark's suspicions drove him to take action. Desperate to uncover the truth, he hired a private investigator to follow Emma and Jake. The investigator, a seasoned professional, quickly gathered damning evidence of the affair, photographs, recorded conversations, and detailed reports of their secret rendezvous. Armed with irrefutable proof, Mark confronted Emma. The confrontation was explosive, filled with accusations and denials. Emma, caught in her lies, broke down and admitted to the affair. The revelation shattered the fragile facade of their marriage, leaving both Mark and Emma reeling from the betrayal. As Mark grappled with the emotional fallout, he made a fateful decision to confront Jake. Fueled by anger and a sense of betrayal, he sought out his nephew, demanding an explanation. The confrontation quickly escalated into a physical altercation, and in a moment of uncontrolled rage, Jake lashed out, killing Mark. Panicked and horrified by what he had done, Jake hastily devised a plan to cover up the murder. He disposed of Mark's body in a remote location and meticulously cleaned the crime scene, erasing any trace of the violent act. Emma, finding herself complicit in the aftermath, reported Mark as missing, setting off a chain of events that would soon unravel their carefully constructed lies. Detective John Harper, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases, was assigned to Mark's disappearance. Harper, with his keen instincts and methodical approach, began to piece together the fragments of the Thompson family's dark secrets. As he delved deeper into the case, Harper uncovered inconsistencies in Jake's story and began to suspect that Mark's disappearance was more than a simple missing persons case. Thus began a relentless investigation, marked by interviews, evidence collection, and the slow unraveling of a web of deceit. Detective Harper's pursuit of the truth would lead to shocking revelations, a dramatic courtroom trial, and ultimately, the confession of a killer. The peaceful facade of Cedar Ridge would be forever shattered, revealing the darkness that lay beneath the surface. The days following Mark's disappearance were fraught with tension and unease. Emma struggled to maintain her composure, haunted by the reality of the situation and her role in the cover-up. Jake, on the other hand, oscillated between cold detachment and bursts of paranoia. The once thrilling affair had turned into a grim partnership in crime, binding them together in secrecy and fear. Detective John Harper arrived at the Thompson residence to begin his investigation. Harper, a tall man with a stern expression and penetrating blue eyes, had a reputation for his meticulous approach to solving cases. As he introduced himself to Emma, he noted her nervous demeanor and the way her eyes darted around, avoiding direct contact. "I'm here to ask a few questions about your husband's disappearance," Harper said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Can you tell me when you last saw him?" Emma swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "It was the night before last. He said he had some work to finish and went to his office. I thought he might have stayed there overnight, but he never came home." Harper jotted down notes, his gaze never leaving Emma's face. "Did Mark seem stressed or worried about anything recently? Any unusual behavior?" Emma shook her head, her mind racing to keep the story straight. "No, nothing out of the ordinary. We've been busy with work and everything." Harper's questions continued, each one probing deeper into the cracks of Emma's hastily constructed facade. As he moved through the house, he made mental notes of the environment, a picture-perfect home that seemed almost too immaculate, lacking the warmth of a lived-in space. Jake arrived home as Harper was wrapping up his initial questioning. The detective observed the young man's entrance, noting the way his eyes widened slightly upon seeing him. Harper introduced himself, and Jake's responses were polite but curt. "Detective, do you think Mark might have left on his own?" Jake asked, trying to sound casual. "It's too early to speculate," Harper replied, his gaze unwavering. "We're treating this as a missing persons case, but we have to consider all possibilities." As Harper left, Jake and Emma exchanged a look of shared dread. They knew Harper's presence was just the beginning, and the detective's sharp instincts would soon bring their secrets to light. Days turned into weeks, and Harper's investigation intensified. He interviewed neighbors, colleagues, and friends, piecing together a timeline of Mark's last known movements. Harper's suspicion grew, particularly towards Jake, whose nervous energy and inconsistent statements raised red flags. Harper decided to follow up on Mark's financial records and phone logs. He discovered a recent life insurance policy that named Emma as the sole beneficiary, a detail that added a motive to the already murky waters. Additionally, phone records revealed numerous late-night calls between Emma and Jake, further confirming Harper's suspicions of their illicit relationship. Determined to uncover the truth, Harper applied for a search warrant for the Thompson residence. His hunch was that the answers he sought were hidden within the pristine walls of their seemingly perfect home. As he prepared to execute the warrant, Harper knew that the tangled web of secrets and lies was about to unravel, leading him closer to uncovering the grisly truth behind Mark's disappearance. Detective John Harper arrived at the Thompson residence with a search warrant in hand. The quiet neighborhood buzzed with curiosity as the police vehicles lined the street. Emma watched from the living room window, her stomach churning with fear. She knew this moment would come, but the reality of it was still jarring. Harper and his team methodically searched the house. Every drawer, closet, and hidden corner was inspected with precision. Emma and Jake, seated on the couch, exchanged anxious glances. Harper's scrutiny of the pristine home seemed endless. In Mark's office, Harper's team found a locked drawer in the desk. After prying it open, they discovered a stack of documents and a small notebook. Harper's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages. The notebook contained detailed records of Mark's recent investigations into Emma's behavior, including notes from the private investigator. "This is interesting," Harper muttered to himself. He called one of his officers over and had the notebook bagged as evidence. The search continued into the basement, a dimly lit space filled with boxes and old furniture. Harper's flashlight beam swept across the room until it landed on a small stain on the floor. He knelt down, examining it closely. It was faint, but unmistakably blood. "Get the forensics team in here," Harper ordered. As the forensic team set up their equipment, Harper returned to Emma and Jake. "We found something in the basement. Can either of you explain a bloodstain on the floor?" Emma's face went pale. She stammered, I don't know. Maybe it was from a cut or something. I really don't know." Jake shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting away. Harper noted his reaction, suspicion growing even stronger. The forensic analysis confirmed that the blood was human, and further tests matched it to Mark. Harper had the confirmation he needed. The atmosphere in the Thompson house grew tenser by the minute. Harper decided it was time for a more direct approach. He separated Emma and Jake, questioning them individually to see if their stories aligned. Under the pressure, Emma's resolve began to crumble. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed to the affair, but she vehemently denied any involvement in Mark's disappearance. Meanwhile, Jake maintained his composure, but Harper's relentless questioning began to wear him down. Harper presented the evidence piece by piece, breaking down Jake's defenses. "You were having an affair with your uncle's wife," Harper said, his voice stern. "And now he's missing, with his blood found in your basement. This doesn't look good for you, Jake." Jake's facade cracked. I didn't mean for it to happen," he stammered. "It was an accident. He confronted me, and things got out of hand." Harper leaned in, his eyes locking onto Jake's. "Tell me everything." Jake, realizing he had no way out, began to spill the details of the night Mark confronted him. The argument, the fight, and the moment of rage that led to Mark's death. He recounted how he panicked, disposed of the body, and cleaned the scene, all while Emma, in shock, went along with the cover-up. Harper listened intently, his face impassive. When Jake finished, Harper stood up. "You're under arrest for the murder of Mark Thompson," he said, handcuffing Jake. The sound of the cuffs snapping shut echoed through the room. As Jake was led away, Emma broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. Harper approached her gently. "Mrs. Thompson, you need to come with us as well. We have more questions for you." The investigation had reached a turning point, and the once quiet suburban life of the Thompson household lay in shambles, exposed to the harsh light of justice. The night Mark confronted Jake was a turning point that neither Emma nor Jake could have anticipated. Fueled by a mix of anger and betrayal, Mark stormed into the house, finding Jake alone in the living room. His eyes, usually warm, were now cold and hard, filled with a fury that made Jake's blood run cold. "You think I don't know what's been going on?" Mark's voice was low and dangerous. "I have proof of everything." Jake stood up, his mind racing. "Mark, listen, it's not what you think." "Shut up." Mark interrupted, his face contorted with rage. "You slept with my wife. In my house. You betrayed me, Jake. You both did." Jake tried to reason with him, but Mark was beyond listening. He lunged at Jake, grabbing him by the collar. The two men grappled, knocking over furniture as the fight escalated. In the heat of the moment, Jake's survival instincts kicked in. He shoved Mark back with all his strength, causing Mark to stumble and hit his head on the corner of a coffee table. Mark collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath his head. Jake stood frozen, horrified by what he had done. He knelt beside Mark, shaking him, calling his name, but there was no response. Panic set in as the realization of Mark's death hit him. Emma, hearing the commotion, rushed downstairs. She stopped short at the sight of her husband lying lifeless and Jake kneeling beside him, covered in blood. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was an accident," Jake stammered. "He came at me, and I didn't mean to. Emma, I swear." Emma's mind raced. She knew they had to act fast. "We can't call the police," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "They'll never believe it was an accident. We have to get rid of the body." Jake nodded, his mind in a haze. Together, they devised a plan. Under the cover of darkness, they wrapped Mark's body in a tarp and loaded it into the trunk of Jake's car. The drive to the remote wooded area outside town was silent, the weight of what they were doing hanging heavy in the air. They dug a shallow grave, working quickly and quietly. Emma stood back, tears streaming down her face, as Jake buried Mark. When it was done, they drove back to the house, the enormity of their actions pressing down on them. Back at the house, they cleaned up the bloodstains and attempted to erase any trace of the violent confrontation. Emma disposed of Mark's personal items, making it seem as though he had left in a hurry. They rehearsed their alibi, knowing they had to present a united front to avoid suspicion. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of their secret grew heavier. Emma reported Mark missing, her voice convincingly filled with concern and fear. Jake played the role of the supportive nephew, helping Emma through the ordeal while hiding his own guilt. But as the investigation led by Detective Harper intensified, their carefully constructed facade began to crack. The truth, they knew, would eventually come to light. The question was not if, but when. Detective John Harper's investigation into Mark Thompson's disappearance had already yielded several troubling clues, but the discovery of Mark's blood in the basement escalated the case to a new level. Harper was now certain that foul play was involved, and his resolve to uncover the truth intensified. Harper assembled his team and reviewed the evidence they had collected so far. The bloodstain in the basement, Emma's and Jake's inconsistent statements, and the private investigator's notebook all pointed towards a sinister conclusion. Harper decided to apply pressure on both Emma and Jake separately, hoping to break their alliance and uncover the truth. The following day, Harper called Emma in for further questioning at the police station. She arrived looking frail and worn, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. Harper's tone was firm but gentle as he began the interview. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to go over your husband's last known movements once more," Harper said, leaning forward. "Can you tell me again when you last saw him?" Emma repeated her earlier statement, but Harper interrupted. "We found evidence that suggests Mark didn't leave on his own. Blood was found in your basement, and we have reached Thompson. We need to go over your husband's last known movements once more," Harper said, leaning forward. "Can you tell me again when you last saw him?" Emma repeated her earlier statement, but Harper interrupted. We found evidence that suggests Mark didn't leave on his own. Blood was found in your basement, and we have reason to believe something happened in your home. You need to be honest with us, Emma. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She shook her head, denying any involvement. I don't know what you're talking about. Mark, he just disappeared. I swear. Harper knew pushing her further might not yield immediate results. He decided to focus on Jake. He believed the young man's guilt and inexperience might make him more susceptible to breaking under pressure. Jake was brought in next. Harper didn't mince words. Jake, we found Mark's blood in the basement. Emma told us about the affair, and we know there was a confrontation. What we need now is the truth about what happened that night. Jake's face went pale, and his hands trembled. I already told you everything I know, he muttered. Harper leaned in closer. You and I both know that's not true. We have evidence linking you to the crime scene. If you come clean now, it might help your case. Jake's resolve began to crumble. He could feel the weight of his secret pressing down on him. After a long pause, he broke. It was an accident, he whispered. Mark confronted me, and we fought. I didn't mean to kill him. It just happened. Harper's expression remained neutral. Tell me everything. Jake recounted the events of that night, his voice shaking as he described the fight, the fatal blow, and the frantic cover-up. Harper listened carefully, taking detailed notes. With Jake's confession, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. Harper left the interrogation room, his mind racing. He knew that Jake's confession was crucial, but he needed more concrete evidence to ensure a conviction. He ordered a search of Jake's car and the remote wooded area Jake had mentioned. The search yielded results. Forensic teams found traces of Mark's blood in the trunk of Jake's car and located the shallow grave where Mark's body had been buried. The evidence was irrefutable. Harper arrested Jake for the murder of Mark Thompson and brought Emma in for further questioning. With the mounting evidence, Emma finally broke down, confessing her part in the cover-up. She detailed how she had helped Jake dispose of the body and fabricate the story of Mark's disappearance. The case was cracked wide open, but the fallout was just beginning. Harper knew the hardest part was yet to come, bringing justice for Mark and navigating the impending courtroom trial that would expose the Thompson family's darkest secrets to the world. The trial of Jake and Emma Thompson for the murder of Mark Thompson captivated Cedar Ridge and beyond. The once idyllic suburban life now became the backdrop for a sensational courtroom drama. The media frenzy was relentless, with reporters and cameras stationed outside the courthouse every day. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Jake sat at the defense table, his youthful face now hardened by months in custody. Emma, looking gaunt and weary, sat beside her attorney, her eyes hollow with guilt and fear. Detective Harper was present, ready to testify and see justice served. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Linda Gray, laid out the case with methodical precision. She presented the evidence gathered by Harper, the bloodstains in the basement, the forensic evidence from Jake's car, and the shallow grave where Mark's body had been found. Jake's confession and Emma's subsequent admission of her role in the cover-up were the cornerstones of the case. Ada Gray began her opening statement with a clear narrative. This case is about betrayal, greed, and a desperate attempt to cover up a heinous crime. Mark Thompson was a loving husband and uncle, whose life was brutally cut short by those he trusted most. The defense attorney, Richard Hargrove, attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative. He painted Jake as a young man who had been seduced and manipulated by an older, more experienced woman. Jake Thompson is not a murderer, Hargrove argued. He is a victim of circumstances, caught in a web of deceit spun by Emma Thompson. Detective Harper was called to the stand first. He recounted the investigation in detail, his calm, authoritative voice carrying weight in the courtroom. He described the discovery of Mark's blood, the inconsistencies in Jake and Emma's statements, and the crucial evidence that led to their arrests. Harper's testimony was clear and compelling, leaving little room for doubt about the defendant's guilt. Next, the prosecution called the forensic experts who confirmed the bloodstains matched Mark's DNA and that the body in the shallow grave was indeed Mark Thompson. The defense attempted to challenge the forensic evidence, but the experts' testimonies were solid and unshakable. Then came the most anticipated moment, Jake's testimony. He took the stand, visibly nervous but determined to tell his side of the story. He recounted the affair, the confrontation with Mark, and the fatal fight. Tears filled his eyes as he described the panic and fear that drove him to hide the body and lie about what had happened. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake," Jake said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted any of this to happen." Emma was called to the stand next. She looked fragile as she faced the jury. Her lawyer had advised her to show remorse, and she did, recounting her affair with Jake and her role in the cover-up with genuine regret. She admitted to being complicit but insisted she never intended for Mark to die. The jury deliberated for days, weighing the evidence and testimonies. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Jake was found guilty of second-degree murder, while Emma was convicted of being an accessory to murder after the fact. The courtroom was silent as the sentences were read. Jake would face 25 years to life in prison, and Emma would serve 10 years for her part in the cover-up. Detective Harper watched as the guilty were led away, feeling a grim satisfaction. Justice had been served, but at a tremendous cost. The once perfect Thompson family was shattered, leaving behind a cautionary tale of betrayal, passion, and the ultimate price of deceit. The trial's conclusion brought a semblance of closure to Cedar Ridge, but the aftermath of the Thompson family's tragedy left deep scars on the community. The neighborhood, once characterized by its serene and picturesque charm, now bore the weight of a dark history that couldn't be easily forgotten. Emma Thompson, now serving her sentence, was a shadow of her former self. Prison life was harsh and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the comfortable suburban existence she once knew. Emma spent her days reflecting on her choices, the affair, and the devastating consequences that followed. She received occasional visits from her children, who were grappling with the public scandal and the loss of their father. Each visit was a painful reminder of the life she had destroyed. Jake, confined to a maximum security prison, faced a grim reality. His youthful exuberance had been replaced by the hard edges of survival. Inmates and guards alike were aware of his high-profile case, making his time behind bars even more challenging. Jake's days were filled with remorse and reflection, haunted by the image of his uncle and the irrevocable actions of that fateful night. Detective John Harper continued his work with a renewed sense of purpose. The Thompson case had been one of the most challenging and high-profile of his career, and its resolution brought him a measure of professional satisfaction. Yet, he couldn't shake the lingering sadness for the lives forever altered by the crime. Harper's reputation as a diligent and relentless investigator was solidified, but he remained humble, aware of the delicate balance between justice and the human cost it often entailed. Cedar Ridge itself underwent a transformation. The once tight-knit community, now more wary and guarded, took time to heal. Neighbors who had once exchanged pleasantries over garden fences now looked at each other with cautious eyes, the specter of betrayal and murder hanging over them. The Thompson house, left empty and forlorn, became a grim reminder of the tragedy. It was eventually sold, but the new owners found it difficult to escape the home's dark past. Mark Thompson's legacy lived on through his children, who, despite their grief, sought to honor their father's memory. They established a scholarship fund in his name, aimed at helping students in need achieve their educational goals. It was a way to bring something positive out of the darkness, a beacon of hope in a time of immense sorrow. The story of the Thompson family became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragile nature of human relationships and the devastating impact of deceit. It served as a lesson to the residents of Cedar Ridge and beyond about the dangers of hidden desires and the catastrophic consequences they could bring. Emma and Jake, separated by prison walls but united by their shared guilt, faced the long road of atonement. Their lives were irrevocably changed, marked by their actions and the heavy burden of remorse. 8. True crime case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.